Welcome to this week's edition of Focus on Connecticut. I'm Tom Appleby. The legislature coming to the last few days of this year's session. Next Wednesday at midnight, everything's supposed to come to a screeching halt. We'll see. Meanwhile, two of our lawmakers joined us from our area. They were up there in Hartford till midnight last night, and they come down here Friday morning. We really appreciate your coming by. Let me introduce them to you. State Representative Jonathan Steinberg, a Democrat from the 136th District, Westport, a very familiar face on Focus, and State Representative Fred Wilms, Republican, 142nd District, Norwalk and New Canaan. Not as familiar because you're a freshman.
I am. I succeeded Larry Cafaro.
Now, are you at the point in this freshman year saying, oh my Lord, what have I done?
Well, it was very overwhelming at first, and I mean that in a very positive way, but there's just so much going on in terms, learning all the new legislators and all the new processes and the committees, and then being contacted by constituents. It's so it took me 2 or 3 months to really feel like my head's above water, and it is now.
And now you'll lose sleep. You'll be working till midnight almost every day, and the craziness of all these bills that come flying in that you haven't had a chance to read and study up on, and yet you're going to be asked to vote on them.
Well, that's been going on in session now for a few weeks, and I've learned how a lot of the bills I voted on in committee, so I'm prepared, but for ones that have come from other committees, I have my laptop on, the bills come up, I research them, I talk with my colleagues, and so I've been able to make informed decisions, but there's a lot going on, that's for sure.
We were chatting before the program about how, as we age, we mellow a little bit. You've been in the legislature for a while now. Have you mellowed towards the process?
I think I understand it better, though I would almost argue that each session is unique unto itself. There's a different dynamic which may be shaped by the priority. We've had the year of education, the year of gun reform. There was a lot of talk about transportation early. So that has some influence on kind of what the buzz is about. But as Fred was saying, there are so many smaller bills, and if they weren't part of your committee, we're all playing catch-up. As he said, we're talking to colleagues, we're looking for a last-minute amendment which may dramatically change the direction of the bill, or some of the things that were part of compromises that we were totally unaware of. So you have to stay on your toes, which is hard to do when you're staying up to 12, 1, 2 in the morning.
Yeah. The main purpose of this session is the budget, which is still being negotiated, although you're saying that there's a possibility this will come up before this week is out.
We've been told that we intend to run it in both the House and the Senate tomorrow, which means that obviously there's a deal. Now, this deal has been between Democratic leadership and the governor. The Republicans have not really been involved, and frankly, other than leadership, none of us have seen the final shape of the budget. Apparently there have been negotiations both on the appropriation sides, looking for additional savings the governor has insisted on, and then the question is, has anything changed on the revenue side, because many of us have concerns about the new taxes and some of the other components like Keno that we really don't feel are a great idea for the budget.
He mentioned that the Republicans really haven't been involved, but that hasn't been by choice.
No.
Or at least by Republicans' choice.
There's really 3 budgets that are out there. The governor came out with his budget earlier in the session, and that budget really hit a lot of social services and higher education very hard. But the state employee unions got about $900 million in raises and wages and benefits. Those had to be paid for, and the governor did try to keep taxes down a bit, so it came out of services that we really think government should provide. So we Republicans came up with our own budget, and it's, as a number of people have said, it's a ready for prime time type budget. We put a lot of work into it. We're very proud of it. What our budget does is it's balanced. It's under the spending cap. We've reduced a lot of gimmicks that were in the budget. We've kept taxes down, and we have asked for employee union concessions and wage freezes, and then restored funding to a lot of social services, like for mental health, autism, Alzheimer's, higher education, that we think government should be providing. So we've offered that budget. We've offered to sit down at the table, and unfortunately we haven't been invited. And so
in effect, it's dead on arrival, which is the way of the world. The Democrats control both houses and the governor's office.
Well, honestly, I felt there were some interesting ideas in the Republican budget. I was one of a few Democrats who attended part of the hearing that they had to talk about the budget. Yes. I also agree that we need to look at our rather rich contract understandings with state workers. both union and non-union. I think we really need to look across the board. There's some middle management which may be a little bit more bloated than it needs to be. It's the only way we're going to change the fundamentals of the budget, because the new reality on the revenue side is such that we can't necessarily count on what we used to have in the past, nor should we. We should be looking at reform. I was very open to some of the ideas they put forward. There are many in our caucus who believe that twice over the past 6-7 years we've already asked unions for concessions, but I'm open-minded to that. I would like to see us consider it further. However, as it's stated, it's good to be the king. It's good to be in power. The Democrats don't have to involve the Republicans in that. That to me is unfortunate.
Let me seize the power for a moment and take a break. When we come back, you mentioned buzz. Let's talk about what the buzz was up there this session.
Okay, great.
We'll be back in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back to Focus on Connecticut. We're talking with two members of the House of Representatives, and we're talking about the buzz for this year. It's your first session, so everything may be buzzing, I don't know, but can you pick out one buzz from all of it?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of buzzes. Certainly, Jonathan and I were on transportation together. Obviously, there have been some major transportation initiatives.
And the governor said this was the year of transportation.
Well, and the Transportation Committee, which we both serve on, there's been a number of initiatives that we've looked at. Tesla, letting them sell in the state. Uber, essentially legalizing them. They're already here. We've had a lot of discussions about tolls. The infrastructure improvement, the governor's plan, which does have some very good proposals for Lower Fairfield County. So that's certainly been a major component that we've been working on, and there's a lot more work that needs to be done, but certainly that's been a major theme.
I agree. That has been the theme. We've maybe lost a little focus on that as the session has progressed, but I'm one of the legislators who has advocated for maybe coming back in special session this fall to continue the conversation. The governor's put together a panel to look at where do we find the money for the billions and billions of dollars we need for transportation. And I'm hopeful that they'll come back with some solid recommendations. I served as the House Chair of the Transportation Bonding Subcommittee of the Finance Committee, and it was our obligation to vet the requests by DOT and the governor for a lot of the money they needed for transportation. Frankly, we didn't give them all the money they asked for, but
And that's just for now.
Just for now. This is the ramp-up period. Right. The 30 years, $100 billion is almost staggering, just trying to conceive of it. But even in the short term, we wanted to hear back from this Transportation Funding Committee to understand what our choices were before we made it such a large commitment. But I'm hopeful that we sustain the momentum and keep transportation foremost. We Fairfield County legislators all run around with our hair on fire, recognizing how critical fixing this infrastructure is for the entire economic engine of this area. So we're going to keep a focus on this. I'm going to continue to push for coming back in the fall. I know some of our colleagues don't love the idea of coming back off session, but it's that important to us, and I think we need to get that focus back.
And I can see the governor wanting to push for something like that.
Absolutely. I just want to just add on quickly. I know that Senator has been leading a bipartisan caucus on transportation, and I really applaud that. Because really, our interests are really our geography, our location. So you have two different parties, but our interests are very, very much aligned, and so that we're working together, I think, is a great step forward. I really do.
We saw that on the jobs bill a couple of years ago. So that's the buzz. That was the major buzz. When you talk to your constituents, what buzz are you getting from them?
They're really concerned about the fiscal crisis that we're in. That finance is big down here. And taxes, and there's a real sense and concern that being in a permanent state of fiscal crisis, what are we doing about that? We seem to be going in a wrong direction, and I'm fearful that if we keep moving in this direction, in 5 to 10 years we're going to become like Illinois or some other states that are experiencing severe financial difficulties. There's a real concern that our economies aren't growing. We seem to be stagnating. In Connecticut, we used to be a leader in so many ways, in manufacturing and the economy, and a lot of corporations moved here. they didn't need subsidies to come here or tax breaks. They just came here because they wanted to be here. And we seem to have gotten off track the last 20 years. And we need to start growing and winning again. And so a lot of people down here are saying, what can we do to really break through this logjam? And I really believe it gets back to partly the budget. We need to set our fiscal house in order on a strong foundation. And part of that conversation needs to be turning the ship of government around with and I go back to the union benefits, because that's such a huge part of our budget and our finances. A lot of towns and cities have already renegotiated a lot of these contracts with health care and pensions and OPEB post-retirement. Norwalk and so many other towns and cities have done that. And their finances are now moving in a really positive direction, where they have more money available to provide for services that people want and keep the tax rates down. And we need to do the same at the state.
You're talking about with the municipal, with state employees, rather.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about the state employees, but I used to serve as chair of the BET in Norwalk, and a lot of mayors and first selectmen have come up. And at the municipal level, they've already renegotiated their contracts. And so now at the town and city level, they're experiencing the benefits of that approach. And I think we need to do the same at the state.
Before you respond, I don't want to cut you off mid-sentence, so we'll take a break. When we come back, I'll give you 2 seconds. Back in just a second. Welcome back to Focus on Connecticut. I'm Tom Appleby, talking with 2 members of the State House of Representatives about the end of session. We've got a few more days. Let me reintroduce them to you. State Representative Fred Wilms represents Norwalk and New Canaan. Jonathan Steinberg represents Westport. I didn't even give you a chance to respond.
Give me time to think about my answer, but I really do agree with Fred. Most of the communication I've received from people focus on taxes and jobs. And Fred made a good point. We used to be a real leader in manufacturing. I'm very pleased. I'm a member of the Manufacturing Caucus, and we've done some really good things since that bipartisan jobs bill. But basically, we lacked leadership for a long time. We allowed the manufacturing sector to wither on the vine, and then we became over-dependent on financial services.
First it went south, then it went overseas. Can you compete?
We can compete in the precision manufacturing area, in narrow niches where we may have a distinctive advantage, like aerospace. Bioscience now is obviously a big emphasis, and added value kind of manufacturing, which you can't do in China or in other places. So we failed to transition effectively, and that's left us behind the 8 ball in many ways and scrambling. And then the other point that Fred brought up, which is, I've heard a lot about taxes, and there's controversy about increases this year. What disappoints me a little bit is that we also empowered a tax panel to come back to us and say, looking at the entire picture, sales tax, income tax, property tax, business tax credits, give us a modern age, what's right for Connecticut strategy, something comprehensive, rather than sort of the piecemeal approach we've been using recently to react to budget shortfalls. We need an approach that really is going to last us for the long term, and that we can institute and then stay with to provide some consistency and certainty for everybody in the state. I think that's the best option we can have.
Wasn't that the argument way back with Weicker that when we imposed a state income tax?
That was maybe the last time we actually looked.
Overall, it would provide for everything.
At the time, it sounded like it was the permanent solution, but it was also probably the last time we had that kind of big picture conversation about taxes. So I would prefer to wait for this tax panel to get back to us, do whatever we have to in the short term, but not talk about big tax changes until we can look at the whole picture and be able to explain it to the people of the state of Connecticut that this is actually in their interest, reducing income tax volatility in terms of revenues, a fairer and more transparent property tax system that can fund our schools. That's what they're really asking for. They want something they believe is going to actually be fair to every citizen.
No, I agree with points Jonathan's made. We need to have that big picture conversation. The income tax, it was supposed to be the answer to all our problems, and actually I think that started the period of stagnation that we're going under. The two, I think, are very much aligned. The income tax is very volatile. A lot of it is the capital gains tax, which depends on how the stock market's doing. So what we have is a situation where you have these permanent spending increases being funded by a volatile up and down income stream. Hence, we have a lot of these financial pressures. And so we need to have this kind of big picture conversation so that we have a budget that's sustainable over the long run.
I asked you in the last block about the buzz from your constituents. Among your constituents are the mayors and first selectmen of your communities. And there was a lot of buzz this week over this bill to expand workers' compensation for police and fire. In particular, this idea that post-traumatic stress disorder should be acknowledged. And they're very much afraid that this is going to skew the budgets considerably.
One of the most controversial issues I ever dealt with when I served on Westport's representative town meeting for 7 years were the heart and hypertension claims that were part of a state mandate created years ago, and it finally expired. But they were often surprise items in the budget running to hundreds of thousands to perhaps $1 million. And we felt so frustrated.
When a police officer or a firefighter says, my disability is related to my job.
Correct. But basically, simply aging, we all will end up with some measure of heart disease, and all they needed to do was find a doctor who would confirm that, and then they became eligible for lots of money that the municipality would have to pay, even though the state mandated it. So it makes me particularly wary, as much as we all want to recognize and take care of those who take care of us, our police and fire people. I'm extremely wary about these additional protections, coverage that can cost municipalities a lot of money, and they can't even anticipate it. So I've been really kind of disinclined to support this initiative.
Well, there's been a lot of talk and controversy over this. I think when the bill was first crafted, a lot of the town leaders were not part of the conversation. I did vote in appropriations for the firefighters part of this. I am sympathetic. I've been contacted by a lot of Norwalk firefighters, and I am sympathetic to the fact that those who fight fires are now exposed to these toxins in putting out fires from the fumes and the smoke that do affect and I believe 1 or 2 firefighters are suffering from cancer right now. So I am sympathetic to those firefighters who fight fires. That needs to be looked at. But with the Senate, I believe they added the police component to the fire component, and in my mind, that's a whole new bill. And I've certainly, on the police side, I have some major concerns and questions about that. So I don't know where that's going to go in the House, quite frankly.
We're going to take a break, then we'll find out where we're going to go in the last block. Stay with us. Just a few minutes left with our guests. Casino gambling, back on the table. Keno, back on the table.
Well, casino gambling, I believe, got through last night.
Yes.
Now,
it's the request by the Indian casino operators to add 1 casino at this point. They wanted 3.
Actually, it's just a study to
But
investigate.
you're only allowing a study for the first
Right.
round.
Yeah.
Which, as soon as they finish with, may still run afoul of the Constitution, and we'll have to deal with that in a year's time. I'm more concerned about the general reliance on gambling revenue to close budget gaps, and I think that what we're seeing going on with casinos opening up in Massachusetts and Rhode Island and the like, the fragmentation of this industry should make it very clear to us that it's dangerous to continue to depend on these revenues, and I'm not so sure adding casinos is going to have much of a added value impact.
Yeah, I spoke at length on the bill last night, and it did pass, but it's my constituents, the feedback I've been getting is that it's very unpopular, that nobody's saying, hey, we want gambling. My speech last night really focused on the social costs of gambling. I have a family member where there's been gambling addiction for the last 30 years, and so we've had to deal with this on a very direct and personal level. You know, we've been involved with Gamblers Anonymous, and the social costs in terms of other addictions, alcoholism, crimes, marriage, divorces, bankruptcies. It's interesting, the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services on their website has a lot of information about the social costs. Roughly about 3% of all Connecticut adults are problem gamblers, and another 4 or 5% are at risk of becoming problem gamblers. And of those who have this addiction or disease or problem, there's a lot of other social ills that come from it. And you know what? It all translates fiscally onto our budget. So when I hear that, oh, well, if we open up another casino, we'll get a lot more revenue. Well, maybe not, but there's going to be a lot of extra costs that are associated. And that really needs to be part of the conversation.
And you brought up Keno. One of the members of the legislature has made a bold statement that it's in the budget and it will stay in the budget.
Is this one of the members who is participating in the budget talks behind closed doors?
Yes, the chair of the Finance Committee, the House Chair, Jeffrey Berger, which disturbs me. We've made efforts in past sessions to keep Keno out of the budget and have succeeded at the last minute a couple of times. But again, it's an example of how we are looking for ways to maybe preserve jobs, which we all want to do, but we do it in a fashion that is perhaps not the best place for government to become involved, which is encouraging gambling.
Mm-hmm. Got about a minute left, so 30 seconds each. Basically, this week the SBAC tests were addressed in the legislature. These tests that high school students have to take, basically, they don't affect their going to college. It's more for the teacher's evaluation and the school's evaluation. Mm-hmm. Your take on it?
Well, I believe we have to have greater accountability, and it's hard in education. If you're a teacher, you say, these tests are taken, and then the results kind of reflect on my evaluation, and I don't control what happens in the children's homes or what happens in their environments, and that's a fair point. But on the other hand, we do need to have, we all know there are some teachers who are great teachers, some who are good teachers, some who are not so good teachers. I hear it from my son and daughter in the Norwalk public school system. They'll tell you, well, this one. We need to have greater accountability, and these tests.
So you're for keeping the SBAC?
I think we need to have some kind of accountability system.
Your 30 seconds.
There tended to be what we call formative assessments to give feedback, rather than to be necessarily responsible for accountability on the teachers themselves. Unfortunately, I think it's been hijacked by the broader conversation about Common Core and standardized testing in general, and I think parents are starting to see the kids getting very stressed out, and they're saying, what, another test? So I think it's unfortunate that it's being caught up in this broader debate, which I think we need to have as a country. I'd like to see less emphasis on standardized tests, and I think you're seeing the colleges are caring a little bit less about the SATs and the ACTs.
Gentlemen, we've run out of time, but you passed the test. I'll give you that.
Well,
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Best of luck in the last couple of days of the
Thank you.
session. Thank you for joining us. Stay tuned. The news continues.